Here's the thalamus here. So I just have this ready-made picture for you in the thalamus here. It's just that understanding that what are the major nuclei of the thalamus here, where they are situated, and what are the nuclei to be remembered here. See, not every nucleus is important in the thalamus here. This thalamus, basically, let me just try to, compare it. This thalamus, like, it belongs to my left side here. That's how it is. That's a left side thalamus for me. And that's an anterior end of the thalamus over there. That's a posterior end of the thalamus. And these are the two geniculate bodies attached to it. Okay. See, first of all, there is this band which is dividing the thalamus in three parts here. This band is called as the medullary lamina, guys. In fact, let me just copy this picture so that I can post it twice. First, let me just tell you about the thalamus in this image, and then I'm going to take it for the connections. Thalamus is basically divided. This is the anterior end. That's the posterior end of this picture. Thalamus is divided by this a white matter bundle running inside, this Y-shaped white matter bundle running inside, which is called as the internal medullary lamina. Internal medullary lamina. And because of this internal medullary lamina, thalamus is divided in three parts. The whatever are highlighted in blue color here, guys, that's toward the medial side. So these are medial nuclei of thalamus. We are not bothered about them because they are non-specific nuclei. The one which I have highlighted in yellow here, this is called as an anterior thalamic nuclei. A very, very recent question of INICET is based on this anterior thalamic nuclei. And all these nuclei that you see on the side here, all these nuclei present on the lateral side, they are all lateral thalamic nuclei. All of them. The entire green color here is a lateral thalamic nuclei. So broadly, first of all, we divide the thalamus into the medial nuclei. All these are lateral nuclei, and then yellow one over there is an anterior nuclei. And these are geniculate bodies. This is a medial geniculate body, and that is a lateral geniculate body. Medial and lateral geniculate body basically are the part of metathalamus. It's not exactly thalamus, but that is metathalamus. Developmentally, that's a detached part of thalamus only. It's nothing special. It's just a detached part of thalamus only. The lateral geniculate body and medial geniculate body. Okay, now guys, let me tell you that what are the specific thalamic nuclei there, and then I'm going to mark those nuclei in this. Not all the nuclei are important. The specific thalamic nuclei which receive some major afferent tracts and then giving the connection to the major part of the cortex or cerebrum. The important nuclei here are this one. This is anterior nuclei. We already said that's an anterior nuclei. This here is called as a ventro-anterior. That's ventrolateral. That's ventro-posterior. They are all important. I'm only writing the one which are important, guys. That is anterior thalamic nuclei. That is ATN, anterior thalamic nuclei. Ventro-anterior. We're not talking about dorsal tier, not important. Ventral tier is important. The ventral nuclei are important. Ventro-anterior, ventrolateral, ventro-posterior. And ventro-posterior is further divided in two parts. We have two parts of ventro-posterior. One is called as VPL as well as VPM. I cannot see both of them at one side. VPL, ventro-posterior lateral. I can only see the one which is outside. The one inside will be VPM. But that is, both are the part of VP only, ventro-posterior. So that's ventro-anterior. Ventro is, ventral mean below, and anterior. So ventro-anterior, ventrolateral more outside, and ventro-posterior. Ventro-posterior के दो part है. One is outside, ventro-posterior lateral, and one inside is ventro-posterior medial. The remaining, just don't bother about them, guys. That's pulvinar, that is, the dorsal group of nuclei, because they are non-specific nuclei. So we only have to know the connections of these anterior, ventro-anterior, ventrolateral, ventro-posterior, and the geniculate bodies also. You can easily discuss that. And there's it's not difficult at all to remember these connections here. I'll help you with this. What I'm going to do is, let me just put a thalamus here. Reduce the size, guys. If this is a thalamus, now obviously we know that thalamus, the main purpose of thalamus is to go and connect to what? To the cerebrum. If this here is a cerebral hemisphere, that's a superior lateral surface. And that's a medial surface. That's a superior lateral surface, and that is a medial surface of cerebrum. I just have to mark some important areas, and the sequence is going to help you remember those guys. See, this gyrus which is present above the corpus callosum, I can go a little quickly because I presume that you're not drawing it here, of course. So this is the gyrus which is present above the corpus callosum, and this gyrus is a cingulate gyrus. This gyrus here is a cingulate gyrus, guys. Cingulate gyrus, whatever it is, this cingulate gyrus is a part of limbic system, and it is receiving the fiber from this anterior. For me, what is important is the sequence. So whatever fiber comes into anterior thalamic nuclei, this anterior thalamic nuclei, right? Whatever comes into the anterior thalamic nuclei, anyways, I have to give you the. So this is anterior thalamic nuclei. Whatever comes in here, it is going to project into the cingulate gyrus here. That's the purpose. That's the final purpose there. Okay. Then we have what? This is VA. This is VL. And then we have VPL and VPM. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide it in two parts, guys. VPL and VPM. Let's say this is VPL and that's VPM. Just for the sake of convenience, VPL and VPM. Look at the three important areas in that sequence only. Let's not change the sequence, guys. Here is a central sulcus. If this is a central sulcus, in front of central sulcus, we all know that we have area number 4, that is motor area. Behind the central sulcus, we have sensory area, that is area number 3, 1 and 2. And more in front of 4, there is area number 6, that is a premotor cortex. That's a premotor cortex here. Just remember the sequence. As I said, sequence is important, guys. Sequence will help you here. VA, VL, VP. VA is going to project into area number 6. That's most anterior out of these three. VL is going to project into area number 4. That is just behind that. And VP, whether VPL or VPM, the VP is going to project into area number 3, 1 and 2. The sequencing, there has to be some way to remember the thalamic connections here. So the sequencing is going to help you guys. So I draw it in such a way that ventroanterior is going to connect to cingulate gyrus, which is on the medial surface actually. And then the three specific thalamic nuclei, VA, VL, VP, VA, VL, VP, and the exact same sequence, 6, 4, 3, 1, 2. So we have a pre-central gyrus, post-central gyrus, and then we have area number 6, which is premotor area in front of the 4. So the sequence over there, in that sequence, the three ventral tier nucleus, ventroanterior, ventrolateral, ventroposterior. That is how they're going to project here. It is going to help me remember that what fibers are coming into them. Now guys, let's pay attention to that what goes into the VPL, VPM and the VL here. VPM receives the sensation which is coming from the face. Dekho, VPM and VPL, how will you remember it? When you say VPM and when you say VPL, M will remind you of mouth and face. Just a way to remember, mouth and face. And L will help remember the lower part of the body or lower body. M, mouth, L, lower. M, mouth, L, lower. That means if the sensation is coming from the mouth and the face, it is going to go into VPM. If the same type of sensation coming from the lower body, that means just below the face here, that will go into VPL. The lemniscus of the face, if you remember, the lemniscus of the face is what lemniscus? Trigeminal lemniscus. So VPM will receive the trigeminal lemniscus. The trigeminal lemniscus. Will receive trigeminal lemniscus. VPL. What lemniscus will go into the VPL, guys? In the VPL, the lemniscus going into VPL are the lemniscus which are coming from the lower part. That what lemniscus are coming from the lower part? The medial lemniscus, the spinal lemniscus. Medial lemniscus, spinal lemniscus, basically those fibers which are carrying the sensation from the lower body. You already know that, guys. Medial lemniscus are the one which are carrying the dorsal column tract and anterior spinothalamic tract. Spinal lemniscus was lateral spinothalamic tract, pain and temperature, right? So these sensations are going to come into VPL, lower mouth, lower mouth. VL, how will you remember VL? Again, very easy. If you look at where VL is going, It will help you remember that. See, VL is going into what? Into the motor cortex. Which fibers need to go into the motor cortex? Why you have to go to the motor cortex? To give the feedback to the motor cortex. And if you remember, the feedback to the motor cortex is coming from the cerebellum. Let me take you here. Look at that. The feedback to the cortex, the motor cortex, is coming from the thalamus, and that is coming from cerebellum. Which two tract? Dentatothalamic, dentatorubro-thalamic. When they go to the thalamus, then they go into the cortex, the motor cortex here. So the feedback coming from the cerebellum is supposed to go into the VL, and that feedback, guys, is coming from where? It is coming from the dentatothalamic tract. Dentatoroubro-thalamic tract. Dentatothalamic and dentatorubro-thalamic tract. Dentatothalamic and dentatorubro-thalamic tract. So these are kind of simple. I mean, the sequencing will help you here. The remaining two you have to remember, guys. The remaining two you have to remember, like VA is going to receive the fiber from the lentiform nucleus, and the medial part of lentiform nucleus is globus pallidum. So this tract is called as a pallidothalamic tract. So ventro-anterior part of thalamus receives the tract which is called as a pallidothalamic. This tract is called as a pallidothalamic tract. Pallidothalamic tract coming from the globus pallidus part of lentiform nucleus. And last, but definitely not the least, the one which goes into the anterior thalamic nuclei. You know where they're coming from? Let me just show you one small connection here, which I hope will help you remember it. Guys, hippocampus was projecting via fornix into mammillary body. Then mammillary body projects into the thalamus, and the thalamus projects into the cortex, the Papez circuit. Papez circuit starts from hippocampus, through the fornix goes into mammillary body. Now mammillary body has to project into the cerebrum. How mammillary body will project into the cortex, into the limbic system, limbic lobe of the cerebrum? Like this. So it's the mammillary body which is going to project into the anterior thalamic nuclei, and from anterior thalamic nuclei they go into the cingulate gyrus, which is a part of limbic system. So this tract here is called as a mammillothalamic tract. This is the mammillothalamic tract, and this is a part of the Papez circuit. Papez circuit. We already said from the hippocampus the fibers comes via fornix into mammillary body. Mammillary body projects into the anterior thalamic nuclei. Anterior thalamic nuclei projects into the cingulate gyrus, which is also called as a limbic lobe. The cingulate gyrus is called as a limbic lobe of the cerebrum, and this was a very recent question only. It's a recent question only, guys. It was a question asked last year in this last INI-CT, when they actually pointed an arrow on the mammillary body in the sagittal section. So arrow was on the mammillary body, and the question was that which thalamic nuclei it will project into. So mammillary body projects into the anterior thalamic nuclei. This whole thing is the thalamic connections.